In this week's video, we'll be talking about setting healthy boundaries.
Oh yes. Have you ever set a healthy boundary before? We have, right, Brandon? One of our very first boundaries that we set was when he turned 13. Yes.
And I got my first phone.
Yes, when he got his first phone. And how did it feel like? I remember the boundaries that we set for you where you cannot be online till late. Yes. And you had to be very careful who you chat with, who you talk to, you know. Yeah. How did it feel, Brennan? Did it feel that it was a healthy boundary?
Not at the time. At the time, I must have been very naive about cell phone because I'd never had a cell phone before, so I didn't know how all of this could impact me. But now, having a phone for a couple of years, I now realize the dangers of having a cell phone and how to use it properly and how to use it for positive things.
Okay, great stuff. I'm glad we're at the same level, so it means going forward with the other boundaries that we'll have to set, you will be okay with them. Okay, so just to describe what a boundary is, a boundary is, this is in line, the explanation that I'm going to give, this is in line between a child and a parent, or a child and a guardian, okay? So it is a line that you draw to define where you end and where a child begins. So I'll give an example. Brendan will ask me, he wants to go have time out with his friends, and I'd say yes. And I said to him, please be home by 6 o'clock. And then the moment he comes at in line with the description that I gave, it means 6 o'clock is my acceptable time. Okay, so it's really up to him now that he does not go beyond that 6 p.m. Okay, so that is what a boundary is. It is a line that you draw to define where you end as a parent, as a guardian, as a parent, and where a child begins. Okay, why is it important for us to set boundaries? Okay, I'll give the first point. They help your child gain independence, remain safe, and make sound decisions. They help the child or teen know what's acceptable behavior and what's not. Okay, the second point, boundaries agreed upon together can create a contract of expected behavior that can help avoid conflict. So going back to the example that I gave, Brennan wants to go out with his friends, they want to go play games, maybe they want to go to a place that has a gaming place. So by him knowing that mom has said be home by 6 p.m., he is not just going to play thinking mommy's okay. Anytime I get home, mommy's going to be okay. So what it does is it makes us not to have any conflict when it comes to the time that he needs to be back at home. Okay, that point is boundaries assure us as a parent that you care and love for your child and make them feel super safe and supported, right? Boundaries prevent parents and teens from building resentment towards each other and promote healthy and enjoyable interactions whilst being firm. Okay, so how do we set boundaries? We set a tone of friendly cooperation throughout the conversations. Okay, so like I just asked Brendan, I know I didn't do it back then, but I feel like right now we're at a point where, you know, I believe that he's mature, or he's maturing. Okay, once in a while it's important to go back and say, okay, since we've set this boundary, how do you feel about coming home before 6 p.m., right? How do you feel about respecting your sleep routine, you know, by not being online? Because social media can also be captivating. Okay, that's a topic for another day, right? Social media can be very captivating. You'll find yourself just scrolling throughout the night, and the following day you are tired. You know, your concentration level is not so great because you are exhausted. Okay, so it's good for us to bounce back and say, okay, since we've set a boundary to say from 10 o'clock you're offline, how do you feel about it? Okay, how does it feel when you say to your friends, guys, I've got to go, I've got to be home? I refuse to use the word curfew because it sounds so negative. So it's good to ask yourself, for me to ask you, how does it feel when I say to you, when you say to your friends, guys, I've got to be home by 6 o'clock, so I'm leaving, you know, do your friends find it strange or is it acceptable? So we've got to kind of have that openness, you know, it's me getting feedback from you. And at the same time, we've got to balance discipline with love and no extremes. So let's say you come here and it's 6:30, right? I've got to be very firm with you to say, okay, we've agreed that you've got to be home at 6 p.m. Now it's 6:30. Don't you think your actions have consequences, right? Do I continue to trust you when I say this and you do that? Okay, it doesn't mean I love you any less, but what it means is I've got to balance that discipline. Okay, it's either I ground you and they say, okay, that following the next Friday, you're not going to have a gaming day with your friends. Okay, that is me being asserting my discipline, you know, and but with love, not that we are fighting. Okay, so so my you want to say something?
Um,
Was it a mouthful?
yeah, it was.
Was it a mouthful?
Yeah.
Okay, you can say what you want to say. Remember, this is a conversation between the two of us, so feel free.
I also agree with what my mom just said, that we also need to be we also need to listen to what our parents have just said. If they say we come back home at 6 p.m., we should respect that boundary that they've set up for us at 6 p.m. Sometimes we don't necessarily see it from our parents' view, and sometimes they want to protect us, but we don't see it from their perspective, and we only think about ourselves, which is quite selfish, because the reason why our parents set boundaries most oftentimes is to try and protect us from what's out there, to try and protect us, to try and keep us safe. That's why to try and instill discipline in us, that when someone says you do something at a set time, you do it. So,
Yeah, so just to back or to support what you've just said, you know, we need to constantly remind our youngsters to think about the potential negative or long-term implications of their decisions. So, you know, like you said, it's to protect you. We've been there before, right? I was once a teenager and you get so excited, you feel like, you know, you're on top of the world. But some things, you know, when they are done in excess or a decision hasn't been made from a point of knowing, what then happens is there's implications, okay? And in some implications, you can't even correct them, or it becomes an eyesore. It's something that is constantly in your face, right? So it is just a reminder to say, whatever boundaries that we've set, don't look at them, don't think of them as a negative thing, right? Okay, so just to you know wrap up from a parent's point of view, do you remember when you were a when you were a teenager, and how you wanted so badly to push new boundaries and begin to test out adulthood? Do you remember those days? I was I remember so vivid, but we're not going to talk about it today. Brendan, do you care to share with us your quote in closing?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I remember very very well.
So this is a quote by Nancy Yearback: creating an atmosphere of mutual respect and consideration for boundaries can lead you to the path of personal happiness.
Oh yes, I love it. I love it. Mutual respect. Yes. Thank you guys.
Yes.
We love you. See
See
you
you.
next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.